Hello, everyone. We'll probably have a few more people start trickling in here, but we're going to go ahead and get started. This is Keto. I'm your moderator. I'm sure you guys all know the drill by now. Questions in the chat, and we will keep our eye out for those. Um, Thank you for being here. We're going to talk about removing barriers to virtual learning. And your presenter team today are wonderful navigators, Rose, Taylor, and Jackie. And so I will stop talking and I will turn it over to them, the experts. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you, Keto. Good afternoon. For those of you who don't know me or maybe haven't come to the other sessions, my name is Jackie. I am the ESL navigator for Kalamazoo Literacy Council. And as Keto mentioned, we'll be joined in this presentation by Taylor Sayers, who is our parent literacy navigator, and Rose Fetzer, who is our adult learning services navigator. And we're going to talk about removing barriers to virtual learning.
One second, it's not.
You're fine.
There.
Okay, so we're going to tell you a little bit about KLC's Virtual Learning Center. So KLC actually had a Virtual Learning Center prior to the pandemic. We had virtual learning opportunities that were available for our jobs program, where we were already getting started with virtual learning for students who were unable to come to Kalamazoo in order to be able. You guys are making me laugh and distracting me. I got my coffee. See. Okay, we had our jobs program available for distance learning because we have multiple learners in locations where it just was not possible for us to send an individual teacher to all of those locations. And so we had set up the WebEx program with a lot of different distance learning tools prior to COVID. And so this was able to help us to kind of quickly move into COVID mode. And so prior to the pandemic, in our adult tutoring program, we had 366 active learners. In our adult basic education program, we had 14 active learners. And in our English as a second language program, we had 124 learners. In our virtual learning center so far, we have enrolled 228 learners. Kalamazoo Literacy Council is a volunteer organization. However, we do have 6 full-time staff members. And of those 6 full-time staff members, we have 3 navigators. And that is one of the reasons why we were able to have such success in the ability to be able to pull so many of our learners online. Our navigator's job is expressly to remove barriers to learning. So before COVID, the navigator job would be to talk to our learners and find out what are the barriers in their life that would keep them from being able to come to learning programs. And so we would help them with things like childcare and transportation and housing issues, and help them file DHHS applications and things like that. Once COVID hit, the navigators were pretty much full-time trying to figure out how to get these learners online and working to cross the digital divide. We also have 199 volunteer tutors and 3 paid ESL instructors at the time when we started the Virtual Learning Center. And so the instruction services that we offer to these 228 learners, we have 4 ESL classes, which are separated by level. We have a test of English as a foreign language preparation class for the exam. We have a citizenship class. We have conversational English 2 days a week. We have one-on-one tutoring for adult basic ed and ESL students with our wonderful volunteer tutors. We have success and empowerment groups, which Julia explained in our earlier session. We just learned about our health literacy options. We have Expressways to Success, which is a program which we use with our adult basic ed learners for them to be able to prepare for the GRE. We have our jobs class, which is really great. Our jobs class right now is really important because it is helping our students who are experiencing unemployment to be able to be prepared for the post-COVID reality. And so our jobs class is working with a lot of our learners to help them to be able to figure out how to write a resume, how to write a cover letter, how to use all these digital resources to even find a job to apply for, what the application process looks like in the post-COVID world, virtual interviews, all the kind of things. So obviously, being able to be online in a virtual learning center is a plus for someone who's looking for a job because it prepares you for the skills that you need in order to be able to do a virtual interview, right? We have our digital literacy class, and Andy is, I believe, is still here. And we have a wonderful IT professional volunteer who has worked with our English as a second language students over the summer, and now with our general population, both ABE and our ESL students in the evenings, using a app that we have called Learning Upgrade that helps them to be able to learn digital literacy skills. We learned about our parent literacy classes as well with Taylor. And we have a writing class, which helps both our ABE and ESL students with their writing skills. So these are the classes that we currently offer through our virtual learning center. Okay, so the objectives of this presentation, we will discuss how to build navigation capacity within your program to address the digital divide, how to address technical barriers, how to address instructional barriers, how to address engagement barriers, and how to establish a laptop loaning program. All right, so I think we've had some pretty good discussion over the digital divide. I will read the definition that is on this slide. A digital divide is an uneven distribution in the access to, use of, or impact of information and communications technology between any number of distinct groups. And so for us here at the KLC, we already had, our digital capacity on our side for us to be able to project all these classes. But when we started with the online classes, it quickly became clear that our students were not at the same level. And so we had many, many students who were on the other side of this digital divide, and we had to address that. So we formed a virtual learning task force. So the KLC is the leader of the Adult Literacy Collaborative. And through the Adult Literacy Collaborative, we worked with the local Southwest Michigan community that works with adult learning to form a task force to discuss specifically what the challenges are to virtual learning for the adult basic ed and English as a second language population that we work with. And so the task force purpose was to propose strategies to address the digital divide to the Adult Literacy Collaborative of Kalamazoo County, and also to think of ways that we need to advocate for the adult learning community in the broader community as well. So our recommendations were based on several barriers. The first one is technical barriers. And I know we're reviewing a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about throughout the day. Technical barriers include software barriers. So even if a student has a computer, has a laptop, they may not have the software that they need to use in order to be able to connect to Zoom or to WebEx, or they may not have the ability to use that software on the specific hardware that they have. We've run into that as well. And then in terms of hardware, a student simply not having a device that they're able to use, and internet. And we talked a lot about different internet issues that we have. Some students don't have internet at all. One of the things that was addressed for us in a certain amount was students who have children within the public schools. They have access to internet, and they were able to use that access in order to be able to connect to our programs, because their children would have been connected through many of the programs through the public schools. But there was not a separate program for adults. So we had to look at how we can figure out for the adults that were not connected by that program who still needed adult basic education. We look at instructional barriers. So we need to have all these classes offered in a way that makes sense virtually. So we had a lot of teachers who were working with us prior to the pandemic, but they weren't necessarily teachers who were digital teachers. Many of them were teachers who only taught in face-to-face classrooms. And so being able to bring those teachers up to speed so that they were able to teach in a virtual classroom, and then also making sure that we had virtual options for the different students at the times that they needed, and the right learning supports for those students in the digital environment. And then we also talked about engagement barriers. So this is something we've also been talking about all day today, just all the different things that are going on in students' lives with the pandemic that make it difficult for them to be able to engage in school. And so just looking at students, for example, who suddenly were having 3 kids at home learning, and also we're trying to figure out, my kid normally gets school lunches. What is my kid going to eat, right? And so trying to figure out all the different things that are changing in their lives, trying to get that information to them. My kid needs diapers. How do I get diapers? Well, you can go to the diaper bank, right? And so just being able to think about those engagement barriers. I've had several students who have a lot of children at home, and they have a lot of distractions in their home, and they tell me that it's difficult to find time to take the class. And so I have had students who are making dinner while they're taking the class, right? I had a student who told me that she had time to take the class in the morning, but she wasn't wearing her hijab yet, and so she couldn't turn on her camera. And I said, well, come to class and leave your camera off. We'll make it work. We have, with our level 1 English class, we have a lot of students who come after work and they're tired at the end of the day. And so one of the things that we've done every day in class, one of the things that Jen, the teacher, does every day at the beginning of class, is she asks the students, how are you? And she says, are you hungry? Are you tired? And the simple act of asking empathizes with them. But if they say, I'm hungry, she says, go get some food. You can eat while we're in class, right? So just thinking about how we can support the social emotional well-being of our learners so that they are able to engage with our lessons. Okay. So to resolve the technical barriers, we need to establish criteria for using existing and loaned digital devices for adult learners. So using their devices or using devices that we provide to them. One of the things that we found is that it's very important when you provide devices to learners that they need to be similar. This is because when we are trying to discuss them over the phone with a learner, when we send a laptop to a learner, the learner receives the laptop, we call them, we don't have a visual on what they're doing. So if every laptop is different, it becomes really hard for us to know what to tell them if it's not the same model, right? So I know, for example, when I work with my students, I can tell them for our laptops, in order to turn it on, the power button is a button with no markings that is black, that's at the top left-hand corner of the keyboard. But if someone had a different computer, it might be difficult to guide them to the power button if it's not the same, right? So just thinking about that. And one of the things that we have done for these laptops that are all the same is we create a visual guide that comes to them so that there's step-by-step instructions that have a picture of that power button and an arrow pointing to where it is, so that we don't have to try to explain something over the phone without a visual for them to see. Okay. So one of the things that has been great is that we were able to create a laptop loaning program. The KLC was awarded $5,000 from the United Way of Battle Creek and Kalamazoo Region Disaster Relief Fund. This was huge for us because we were able to communicate to them at the beginning of the pandemic, when they had these funds, that we were an essential service, that we needed laptops, and they were able to look in their budget for that crisis relief and say, okay, this is an important need, and we can provide this as part of the essential services that are being provided at the beginning of the pandemic. And so we were able to get this very early on. We were able to use the laptops to help learners complete unemployment applications. This was really important because if you remember at the beginning of the pandemic, there were so many unemployment applications that needed to be filled. And for those of you who were filling them, you might realize that you could call 3 days in a row, 8 hours a day to the unemployment hotline, and you weren't going to get through to anybody. So the only way to do it was using a computer. We also were excited to be able to connect adult learners to community resources to help them remove barriers, because everything all of a sudden was online. People were not able to go in person to receive services. And so providing them with this device gives them that access, that important access in this difficult time. We also were able to provide them with information on how to complete the census. So these laptops came out at the time that the census needed to be filled out, and we were able to provide them the information and help them to be able to fill out the census using the computers. And of course, we were able to connect learners to our classes and tutoring services, which is important for them to be able to continue learning. One of the things that we were very excited about was that these laptops were used for our services, but also for other needs that the learners have. And we had 45 laptops that were sent out, and we have over 200 adult learners that have been connected. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Taylor.
All right, so inviting adult learners into virtual learning. How do we do it? The first thing that we did was mail postcards to every enrolled learner. This was the first thing we did when we made the transition. It was extremely important for us to try to reach every learner that we had access to or previously had relationships with and make our best effort at getting them connected in some way. So the physical postcards going out to the address we had on file was our first attempt at re-engaging them once we had to move completely virtual. The next was phone calls made to every enrolled learner. So this is something that we did from the beginning, and we still continue to do it. So I spoke a little bit to this much earlier, but we try and call at different times of day, different times of the week, using different modes. So through email, through text, through a phone call, so that we make the best effort possible at reaching a learner, because we don't know their schedule. And it's likely changed since the last time we did know their schedule. So we need to give them the most opportunity to reach us if they are looking to engage with us. And then for those who needed technical assistance, a phone call was scheduled to walk with them through the process. So typically the way that this would look is they would receive a laptop, or maybe they've already had the laptop and something new happened. First contact would look like a phone call. We would call them as they are setting up the laptop and talk them through, what they should be seeing, what they're needing to do, and maybe describing what apps it is that they're going to be using. So if I'm working with a learner and I know that, they are going to be attending my class, so they need to get on WebEx, I'll probably talk them through like, what does the WebEx icon look like and how do I find it on my computer, so that when they're doing that, they can do it independent of a navigator when it comes up. Often we may do a few times for the sake of repetition. That way they feel comfortable when it's time for them to do it on their own. We also have access to an app called TeamViewer, which allows us to remote access into their computer. So if they're really struggling, we can pull up their codes, log into their computer, and not only see what they're seeing and be able to describe verbally to them what they should be doing, but if they're really struggling, we can take control of their mouse and physically show them where to go, and then revert back and allow them to do it themselves so that they feel comfortable doing it on their own. As Jackie mentioned, we do have the laptop loaning program, and when they receive their laptop, they also receive a letter with the name of their navigator, a picture of their navigator, and then the number of who will help them. So this is an example of what might come on the letter. So that's me, and it was saying that I will call you soon. This kind of helps them feel connected, know who they're talking to, have an expectation of the name of the person. It's not a shock when we call them. They anticipate that help is on the way, which is comforting. And then we will help you every step of the way. So, the first contact when they get the laptop, it might be the phone call to completely walk them through, but maybe 3 months down the road, something new happens. They still have access to us. We are happy to serve them and hope that they'll come back and ask us questions when something new arises, so that they can continue building on their skills and, optimizing the way that they use the technology that we sent. So Jackie mentioned earlier that we have sent out visual guides. This is an example of one that I think we personally might use the most, even though there are others that we've created for specific apps. So this goes with every laptop as it goes out, as a means for them to have a physical reference for the different steps of, setting up the laptop and accessing the apps that they need. So we have a common password. So if a learner ever gets locked out of their computer, we know what their password is so that we can help them log back in. If they misplace it or forget it, we already know what it is so that we can help them log back in. It makes it easier on us. And then we have consistent naming conventions. So if we give them a login for a specific website or a specific app that they're going to be using when learning with us, we always use first initial, last name, 6-digit birthday. Again, if they lose that information, we're not struggling to figure out, what elaborate username or password they might have come up with on their own. We set it, it comes already on there, and we know what it is, so we can help them figure it out without a lot of trouble. And then, like I mentioned earlier, we do use TeamViewer. I honestly use it a lot. It's very convenient, especially when things come up like having an update or something like that and learners aren't completely sure what's going on. It's nice to be able to just log in and see what they're looking at. If they're describing something that you don't think you've ever seen before. I recall having a learner tell me that they had a birdie on their computer and couldn't figure out why it wouldn't connect to the internet. And what they were referring to was airplane mode. They had accidentally turned on airplane mode and couldn't figure out why they couldn't access internet. I would have probably never figured that out had it not been for TeamViewer, when I could log into her screen and see what it was they were referring to. So this is a picture of the layout of the laptops that the learners get, also the laptop that I use. So we use a consistent setup. All of the apps are in the same place when they get the computer. It's already preloaded. So when I say to them, you're looking for TeamViewer, it's a blue square with a white circle and arrows inside of it. That makes it relatively clear. I can also try and say, it's the fifth one from the top, or whatever the case is. I often underline some of those keywords that are kind of related to the technology, just because it's vocabulary that I might use or a navigator might use when working with them on the phone. So if I say, like, can you go back to your home screen? Well, if they don't know, what I'm referring to when I say home screen, that makes it really difficult to get back to it. But having this on that physical reference guide, oh, that's my home screen. Okay, I know how to get there. Makes it easier. Not only did we send laptops, but we also sent hotspots, which personally I was confused when I first set up a hotspot by myself. So I can imagine somebody getting one and not knowing how to set it up. So we not only described where to go to set up, if you have your own internet and need to punch in your own Wi-Fi, or if you have a mobile hotspot, and what are the steps to doing that. We have separate instructions for completely setting up the hotspot itself that dive a little bit deeper into that, but just know where they need to go to find it was important. And it does require the most patience. It can just be a little bit confusing. Personally, I have issues all the time, even with my Wi-Fi becoming disconnected and having to redo it. It can get confusing, but understanding where you need to go, and then again, having something you can return to if you were to get stuck on this part is really important. We describe every icon on the desktop. So if I say TeamViewer, I can describe what it looks like. But if they were to have this in their hands as well, they might be able to just reference it and say, okay, that one's TeamViewer. I like to explain what certain apps are for. Sometimes if I just say internet browser, someone might not gather that that's Google, but I try and outline that here. It makes it easier for them to understand, where the app is that they need to find or what they need to use it for. We specifically outlined in this particular guide what it looks like when you join a class. Most people have not used WebEx in their personal lives. It's not very common, and personally, I never used it prior to using it for work. So it might be a little bit confusing if you've never done it. So we wanted to describe what this looks like, since WebEx is the primary platform we use for our classes. So that's showing them where they need to click to get to it, and then showing them what the next screen is going to look like when they do it. It needs to follow every exact step, because if something happens that they don't see on the guide, that's going to throw off the whole process. It's going to make it all very confusing. So showing exactly what is next is extremely important. So this is once they, have a WebEx account, that box, it shows up every time they log into their computer. It's probably one of the easier ways to join a class, aside of just going to your email and saving the link every time. But it would show that, next they can just put a link in to join. It's going to be there every time. So it's tried and true. It helps with the repetition. And this is the almost there slide. So what we found was a lot of times learners would get to this point and say like, I'm in the class, but I can't see you or hear you, because they could see themselves and they thought, you know, that you're there because you could see yourself moving on the slide, you're talking, you know. But we would often realize that they were still in the preview screen. So we wanted to outline that, you know, this is the preview and you're not quite in the class. But we took the time to outline like, here's what the class is called and the time. Are you going to the class that you think you're going to? Here's how you fully join. And then here's where the buttons are to turn your microphone on and off, your camera on and off. Some people don't want to enter, you know, the room with their camera on for whatever reason, but they might not realize how to turn it off if we don't specifically show them the button. And then again, walk the learner through every button that will be used. So I outlined what each button is for, what it should look like when, you know, it's in a particular mode. So if it's red, they cannot see you, it's off, you know, being very clear about how the buttons work and what they do. And the best thing to do when, and it's something that I'm pretty sure every navigator does, it's become a pretty common practice for us, is when a learner gets their laptop, we call them until we can see them. So we walk them through every step of getting into a meeting until I can see their face there. And that allows us to then practice a lot of the things that we're showing on this guide so they know what to expect when it comes time to join a class. Darumas.
Thank you, Taylor. All right, so some quick tips to overcoming instructional barriers. So like Jackie talked about, we did have a virtual task force to identify specific needs of our learners and then construct supports to address those needs. So some of these tips that have evolved from this are creating opportunities for instructors and students to learn in a virtual environment has been extremely important. We are using, of course, our bi-weekly tutor checkups, which we'd love to see everyone coming to. Visual guides, thank you Taylor and Jackie for those, and then assistance from navigators. So if you need help, ask us. And between the three of us, we pretty much have most stuff covered. So we're good for it. And opportunities to train instructors. So we do this through our tutor training, but for our established tutors, again, through our bi-weekly sessions. And then digitizing. So all of our materials that our learners and tutors want to use, we have our lovely Michael Evans, our director and fearless leader, to digitize those documents for us. All right, so support for tutors and learners. We do have weekly empowerment groups led by Julia. She's one of our Western interns, which is really great for our learners, another opportunity for them to be able to talk about any struggles or really anything that deals with being able to be empowered and join us in learning. We also have social activities, specifically through ESL. Jackie and her tutors do a lovely job engaging all of their learners. I know that they do holiday parties, most recently Halloween, where everyone dressed up and just had a great time seeing each other and having a happy moment, even virtually. So that's been fabulous. All right, skills of a proficient virtual tutor. Now we will take anyone wherever they're at. So please don't be, discouraged by these 7. But being able to locate a PDF document, these documents will be sent in by navigators or Jesse, and we will walk you through every step on how to get it, open it up, and then share it through WebEx. Being able to use WebEx, clicking on those links. We love to see tutors who are also able to schedule their own sessions. And we can teach you how to do that too. And we even have learners who can schedule their own sessions too. So if they can do it, so can you. Being able to turn your camera and microphone on and off, of course. Being able to share your screen with your learner. We can also teach you how to do that. Annotations seem scary, but it's really not. Printing your screen. So not even necessarily printing it to a hard copy, but being able to take a screenshot and save that as a digital file and sharing it with whoever you need to share it with, and then attaching documents to emails has also been very important. Lots and lots of learners have access to email and are quite proficient. So being able to share digitized documents from us or maybe their work that they've done through annotation, very powerful and effective tools. Skills of a proficient virtual learner. Now, again, we meet learners where they're at. So really a proficient learner for us is anyone who wants to learn. But we've seen these areas as great opportunities and just great ways for learners to be able to be more engaged. So using WebEx and Zoom links, again, being able to turn your camera and microphone on and off, being able to receive and send emails or texts, and most of our learners do have access to email or text or Facebook Messenger or lots of other places, and then being able to save and retrieve documents. We haven't seen a lot of retrieving documents, but definitely being able to email documents back and forth has been a great skill, or at the very least, just being able to receive them through an email has been vital. Our supply chain management. So we have, again, Michael Evans, our director, in the office. He is the only one in the office. The rest of us are remote. So he has done all of our inventory and he has done all of our mailing. We do have a list, a mailing log that us navigators write on when we have something that we need for a learner. Anything from crayons to a laptop to notebooks, we get to write on there and say, hey, we need it. And then Michael and oftentimes his sons as well will help package and ship things out. So thank you to all of them. All right. Virtual Learning Task Force. So this is for the overcoming engagement barriers. We have been very lucky in our engagement, and maybe luck is not the right word, but we have had success in engagement, which has been great through training navigators and our staff, not our staff, but navigators and our tutors, to be really conscientious of how to overcome our digital divide. Yeah, so lots of strong training, lots of opportunities to learn, again, with those bi-weekly tutor checkups. Connecting to learners and community resources. This is one of the primary objectives of navigators, to see the learner as a whole person and to make referrals out to agencies. We have a ton of amazing agencies in Kalamazoo. So sending learners their way when they need some more support. Also, empowerment groups. Again, those success groups that Julia leads are a great place to talk about more needs from learners and then having that peer support from other learners who may also be experiencing that. Taylor, if you want to click through this one so we can see it all perfect. Thank you. So our circle of support. This depiction shows the learner as a whole person. So when you have one piece that is struggling, it can pull the learner. And we know that all of these areas are connected. So it's really difficult to connect to services when you don't have transportation, or to get employment when you don't have reliable transportation. So, and that includes even public transportation right now. So knowing that all of these areas impact our learners and being able to see them as a whole person and address these things with them and making plans. So we do ALP interviews and we ask, what areas do you need? What is everything that's going to keep you from being able to come and learn with us, and let's work it out together. These are some navigation tips from Taylor, Jackie, and myself. A couple of highlights are peer relationships. So that's been very important to continuing fostering those for both learners and tutors. So we love that. Empathy. So being very patient and kind with yourself and your learner. I was reminded recently about how there are a lot of very successful and lucrative businesses who are newly virtual, and professionals are having difficulty with the online stuff. And remembering that and being kind to yourself and to your learner about the difficulties with getting online, using WebEx, using Zoom, sharing your screen. Just, understand that well-paid professional people are having difficulties, so we are really doing an amazing job. One of Jackie's points, which I love, is choosing the path of least resistance. So what is the learner most comfortable with? If they know how to use their phone, let's use phones. It's great. I know even some tutors who are more comfortable with their phone than their computer. Oftentimes there are fewer buttons to click and fewer wrong things to click, which is great. Let's start there, no problem. We have, you can access all of our classes on your phone, and you can access digital learning on your phone. So let's do that. All right, our virtual huddle board. So every morning we have our daily check-in, which we go over these stats. So they cover our KPIs or key performance indicators that are directly tied to the success of our learners. And if you don't measure it, then it won't get done. So we follow careful measurements and of our goals, and they really are closely tied to the success of our learners, especially those ALP interviews. We find that the more conversations we're able to have with learners, the more engaged they're able to be, we are able to address more needs and increase retention. Those stars popping up, lovely. Sometimes they're stars and sometimes they're red arrows. But both are good. It's good to know where we need to keep going, and it's good to know when we've had a success, so that it's all good. All right, this graph shows our growth in weekly attendance. So again, we've been very fortunate to see a growth in this. The dip does show our 2-week gap where we don't have any classes. So that's where that is. But we are so fortunate that it does pick right back up, which is great. And in that gray box, we see attendance consistently improves once key challenges were addressed. So that refers to learners on an individual basis. So when we have a learner and they've identified an area where they need assistance and we're able to help with that, retention goes up for that learner. So that's a really great thing. And of course, the graph is again tied to our daily huddle board, and we have weekly case management and our monthly goals, which are broken up into that huddle board. All right, growth and weekly enrollment. Another great one. So green is the goal, red is the actual, and we really attest this growth to us being able to set and meet these goals and objectives that we have. So yeah, and we like to see that our goals are closely tied to attendance, and this proves a correlation. So we're very pleased. Final thoughts about navigation. So at the KLC, we absolutely love and pride ourselves on being a volunteer-led organization. And that means that anyone can be a tutor. and we as navigators take on a similar mindset in sharing these digital literacy skills. So very, very important. We also have really great community support in Kalamazoo through our donors and volunteers, and our upper management and directors have a clear mission and vision for our organization. So that makes it easy to create goals and then meet those goals. And lastly, setting goals and making connections between learner success and these goals has been extremely important and motivating. So seeing that these objectives are closely tied to outcomes, we love it. All right, and this is our contact information. And I think it's time for questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Taylor, Jackie, and Rose. We appreciate you and all the value you guys bring. While we're waiting for some questions to load in the chat, I wonder, Jackie, can you talk a little bit about the language barrier and how we have worked through that with, I know you mentioned Google Translate, but we also have the interpreter service because we have so many different languages that we're working with. Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yes, so we do have a very wide range of languages, and although I do speak Spanish and I'm able to work with our Spanish speakers, there are several lower level students who speak Kinyarwanda, Mandarin, Cantonese, Kurdish, and so we have enlisted the services of a interpreting organization that provides over the phone interpreting services, and that's been really important because with those students, we want to give them the agency to be able to express their needs. And it's very, very difficult to do just by pantomiming and trying to use their limited English. And so it has been really, really great to be able to reach out to them using someone who can speak their own language. And it really has helped us to understand a lot better both their educational goals and needs that they have that we were not able to understand without having someone who speaks their language.
Thank you. So we'll go ahead and open up the floor for questions and comments. Again, don't be afraid to ask what you think might be a silly question or a simple question. Everyone else will be happy that you did. And as you've heard all day, and certainly in this session, we've got this amazing team of experts to help address maybe things that you may be facing in your organization, or if you want us to expand on any piece that we've already talked about, just go ahead and speak up. So Rose, you are fairly new to the organization. What has gotten you the most excited about your role? Did you have any early wins or something that you experienced or noticed or saw coming into the organization that really got you excited?
Quite a few things. I love how supportive and just thoughtful we are to each other. I really appreciate that. And for our learners, yesterday I got to have, pardon me, a great conversation with one of our community partners, YOU, about our jobs program, specifically about the new partnership with the YWCA in it's like an internship program there. with early childhood development. So talking about how to best coordinate those services and how to make a clear and effective path for learners and community members to access that apprenticeship. So that was very exciting. And yesterday I also got to talk to one of our tutors, and we learned all about WebEx. We got everything set up, and she's good to go. That's kind of a personal plug, but it really happened, and it was great.
Nice. Plug away. Very cool. Anyone else? Any other thoughts, questions? We will make the PowerPoint available. I think Jesse mentioned, we'll make sure that it's added to the session so you guys can refer to this. And certainly if there are any questions or anything that comes up at a later date, you have our contact information here. So just feel free to reach out. All right. Okay, if there isn't anything else, then we're going to move into our last session of the day. Again, take a quick stretch break, refresh your Skittles or your Mochis or your coffees or whatever, your Red Bulls, whatever it takes, your Mountain Dews. And we will see you guys at 3 o'clock for our final session of the day. Thank you, Rose. Thank you, Taylor. Thank you, Jackie. Thanks for attending, everyone.